Yeah. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Yeah, thanks for being present here today. I think I am here for this session since 3 o'clock today, and I have seen the people, all the experts are talking lot about different regulations. Yeah, so I'll not go into regulations now. Yeah, I'll take you through a different topic, very interesting topic. In fact, it is adhesive food safety, Henkel approach. Yeah, and my introduction is already given by Himesh, so I'll not go into that. Yeah. So here's the agenda. We'll start with why food safety is becoming important day by day. Then very briefly, I'll talk about the legislations which are effective for adhesives. Then we'll move to a very interesting topic, that is Henkel Food Safe Packaging Initiative. Then finally, we'll go to the conclusive part. Yeah, let us see why food safety is becoming important day by day. Here in this slide, I'm showing few megatrends that drives the packaging market, which in turn drives the development of adhesive for packaging. As I think all of you know, that urbanization is a megatrend. Yeah. Nowadays, urbanization is increasing day by day, and today almost 55% of the world population lives in cities. And I think by 2030, we will have around 40 mega cities with population exceeding 10 million. With increasing urbanizations, the need for packaging also increasing, because people living in the cities, they look for packages, products in packages, rather than buying them as a fresh produce. Then another megatrend is demographic changes. Yeah, demographic shifts also leading to changes in buying behavior of people. In some societies nowadays, in fact, aging population is increasing, while in some societies, the young populations are increasing. Yeah, like for example, in Japan, the aging population are increasing. And accordingly, there is a shift in packaging also. Yeah, many times, for example, aging populations needs different kind of package. Yeah, they need sometimes easily tearable packs. Yes, they sometimes need packages with better printing, more visibility, etc. Then one of the most important megatrend is the sustainability and waste reduction. Yeah, nowadays actually, because of increasing the global populations, there is a lot of pressure, there's tremendous pressure on the natural resources. Have anybody heard about Earth Overshoot Day? It is on the 1st August. Earth Overshoot Day is the day when the humanity's consumption of the natural resources exceeds that Earth can produce in a year. Yeah. This year, this is coming on 1st of August. And that means we are consuming all the resources within 7 months of time. And for the next 5 months, I think we will be on loan. That is the kind of consumption we are doing now. Yeah, that's why these terms, sustainability, waste reductions, and recyclability, these are very important for all of us nowadays. Yeah, and I think packaging is not different from that. Let us see how these megatrends are impacting the development of packaging and development of adhesives. Nowadays, our customers are looking for, in terms of sustainability, VOC-free adhesives, yeah, less energy of use. They are going for solvent-free kind of adhesives. They are looking for lower CO2 footprint, and they are also looking for less wastages in their process. And in terms of performance, they are looking for better quality, more machine speed, yeah, and of course, everybody is looking for the food safety nowadays. There are more changes around us. If you remember, I think in 80s or early 80s, 40 years back, a food manufacturer was the only person responsible for ensuring the safety of his product. But nowadays, the situation is completely changed. Nowadays, it is more like farm to fork kind of approach. Yeah. That means everybody along the food chain is responsible for ensuring food safety. Yeah. For our kind of applications, for flexible packagings, it is starting from the raw material supplier, adhesive manufacturer, ink manufacturer, then film manufacturer, the converters, then food product manufacturer, distributor, dealer, everybody is responsible for ensuring food safety. Okay, there are more changes around us. You can see here. There is a revolution in social media, revolution in connectivity, and that's why nowadays information spreads very rapidly. And there is a consequence of that. Yeah. If something goes wrong, yeah, that effect can be very, very serious. And we have example from history, I think. Yeah, that effect can be very serious. What's the problem? As I said earlier, that nowadays customers are looking for different functionalities in the packaging, different functionalities in the adhesives. So that's why we need to use a number of chemicals in the packaging. And these chemicals actually, if they remain unreacted, they have the potential to migrate to the food. Today's problem is the migration of chemicals from packages to the food. Here I am showing a cross-section of a flexible pack. I think I don't have to explain any one of you. You are expert in that. Just 2 points to be noted here. Number one, aluminum acts as a perfect barrier. That I think all of us know. And number two, any plastic film is permeable to molecules with molecular weight less than 1000. Okay? We have danger from molecules which have molecular weight less than 1000. Yeah. That depends also on the plastic film. Different plastic film has different permeability, but in general we consider 1000 molecular weight as the threshold limit. Yeah. So aluminum acts as a permanent barrier. So anything from the left side of aluminum cannot migrate to the food, but there is an adhesive layer you can see on the right side of aluminum. Any small molecule, any harmful chemical present in that adhesive layer that can migrate to the food through the CPP film. So we need to be extremely careful here that there is no such harmful chemical, no such migratable chemicals present in the adhesive layer. Yeah, here I am showing few of the regulations. Yeah, I'll not go into details. I think all of you know about these regulations. Yeah, these are some major regulations like European Framework Regulation and Plastic Regulations, yeah, which are effective almost worldwide. Then FDA regulation also, they are effective almost worldwide. And China has adopted their own regulations around 1.5 to 2 years back. Yeah, let us see the global picture here. I'm going to explain you from left-hand side to right-hand side. Yeah. In the US, you can see here the US FDA regulations, different chapters of US FDA that is effective. Then in Canada, we have the Canadian legislations. In South American countries, yeah, they actually adopted a variant of European regulations. And Europe, of course, the European regulations, it contains, in fact, framework regulations, plastics regulations, BFR, then Spanish regulations, and Swedish ordinance, which are already discussed, I think. Then in India, we follow both. We follow, in fact, plastic regulation as well as US FDA regulations. And our Food Safety Authority, as I think some discussion was going on already today, Food Safety Authority, FSSAI, they have published the draft of the first amendment and they have mentioned some migration limit there. Yeah, and it is a very positive sign, in fact. But as Mr. Sunil Bhagwat said, I think we need to do a little bit more in terms of migration here, because I think some of the information from European regulations needs to be extracted to our regulation also. Then only this regulation will be, yeah, a better one. Then as I said earlier, in China, they have adopted their own regulations. It is more or less similar to European regulations, but not exactly same. Yeah. That's all about the regulations. Now I'll take you through an interesting topic, the Henkel Food Safe Packaging Initiative. When we talk about food safety, I think I'll not include the people present here, but outside, if I talk about food safety, people get scared. When they hear the word FDA, they get scared. Yeah. They think that food safety is a rocket science, but it is not a rocket science. To implement food safety, you need to do three things. Number one, use safe material. Number two, run a safe process. And number three, prove your safety. Now, in the next slide, I am going to show you how Henkel can support you to implement food safety from adhesive point of view in all three steps of your process. Yeah. We have a food safe product portfolio that can allow you to use the right kind of adhesive for your packaging. Yeah, that will ensure the food safety of your packaging from adhesive point of view. And secondly, we can support you to run a safe process. Yeah. Our technical service team is always, means 24 hours, 365 days at your disposal. They can be at your side. They can guide you how to best use the adhesive, what kind of mixing ratios to be used, what kind of temperature conditions, what kind of curing times to be used to ensure that the curing of the adhesive system is perfect. Then also we provide off-the-site services. Off-the-site services means we are just a phone call away from you, or you can connect to us anytime through Skype, yeah, for any kind of support required. Then we have the equipment offering. I think some of you probably has heard about the equipment called Lioscan. Yeah, this is the equipment. Actually, that determines the mixing ratio in a lamination process. Yeah, mixing ratio in lamination process is extremely important because if the mixing ratio is not right, then your adhesive curing is not right, then it will lead to a lot of monomers present in your packaging that can migrate to the food, making the food unsuitable for consumption. Yeah. Then we can also support you to prove your safety. Our food safety statement is the first evidence of that. We can also support you with analytical services. We have analytical laboratories available in Düsseldorf, in Bridgewater, and in Shanghai that can support you, yeah, for any kind of food safety or migration testings to be done. We can support you, yeah, in any such kind of testing, yeah. And we are actually setting up laboratories in India also, but it will take some time to go to that standard of Europe or US. Then, third and important point is Henkel has triple food safety evaluation competence. Let us see what is that. Triple food safety evaluation competence. Yeah, I'll take a little bit of water. I had a bad throat yesterday. Yeah. Yeah, triple food safety assessment means three kind of assessment. Number one, supplier information assessment. Number two, analytical assessment. And number three, toxicological assessment. I'll explain you all these three kind of assessments in the following slide. Yeah, here you can see supplier information assessment. We at Henkel, we implemented a very strict raw material selection process. Before a particular raw material enters into Henkel system, we actually send this document on the right-hand side to our supplier. Yeah? They need to analyze their product and they need to sign this, fill up this document and send this document to us. What does it contain? I'm going to explain you now. It requires the compliance to food contact criteria. What are the food contact criteria? It requires the compliance to US FDA regulations, European regulations, or any other regulations that the supplier would like to mention there. It also requires the absence statement for some dangerous chemicals like CMR substances, carcinogenic, mutagenic, reproductive substances, and absence statement for heavy metals. Then, of course, the detailed information of NIAS, non-intentionally added substances, then dual-use materials, and any other impurities. It also requires a clear commitment from the supplier to promptly notify Henkel if there is any change to the given information. Yeah, after getting all these documents, we do something more here. Yeah, at our end, we try to understand the raw material and the production process. Yeah, how these raw materials are being produced, what are the possible byproducts or impurities that can be formed. We try to understand with the support of the supplier. Then we try to identify the impurities and byproducts and set limit for those impurities and byproducts so that food safety requirements are never compromised. We have expert laboratories, as I said earlier, in Düsseldorf, Bridgewater, and Shanghai. They can easily measure these things very quickly. Going ahead, yes, the second part of the assessment is analytical assessment. Yeah. As I said earlier, Henkel laboratory in these countries like Germany, US, and Shanghai, also in India, they are capable of doing many kind of analytical tests. In fact, the laboratory in Europe, it is an accredited department that offers a number of services that matches the best in the world, in fact. Yeah. So we can do some of the testing. Here are some examples. At raw material level, we can determine whether, determine additives, residual solvents, and impurities. And at finished product level, we can determine whether the specific migration limits and the overall migration limits are respected or not. And we have also the potential to screen the NIAS, non-intentionally added substances, at both raw material as well as finished product level. Yeah, this is the third part of the assessment, that is the toxicological assessment. Yeah, many times only analytical testing is not sufficient to prove that all the risks are completely eliminated. Yeah, almost 50% of the time it is not possible just by doing analytical testing that the food safety risks are eliminated. In that case, we have the capability to do toxicological testing at Henkel. Yeah, this can be done in two ways, based on the information given in the supplier questionnaires, or in case these informations are not sufficient, then we can also do it ourselves. We have that kind of expertise. You can see here, there are few examples here of such studies being carried out in Henkel. I'm not going to each and every detail, but I would definitely like to take one example here. Yeah, this is a in-depth food safety study being carried out in Henkel. This is about metabolism of cyclic ester in the stomach. Yeah, as probably most of us know that during polyesterification, some cyclic esters are always formed. Yeah. So these cyclic esters, they are neutral molecules. Yeah, they don't react with an NCO component. Therefore, they are present as such in the food packaging, and they have the potential to migrate to the food. Many of these cyclic esters are not harmful, but the one form from phthalic anhydride and DZ. Okay, this is a very dangerous cyclic ester. When it is present inside our stomach, it can act as a plasticizer. Yeah, it is similar to the phthalate plasticizer. So I think Yeah, this is a very nice study going on. There are more studies going on metabolism of cyclic esters in the liver also. And if I get some opportunities, I'd like to explain this to you in future, in detail. Yeah, so here we do something more. We collaborate along the value chain. We collaborate with the raw material suppliers, OEMs, yeah, then converters, food manufacturers, retailers, to ensure that food safety is never compromised. Yeah, here I'm just trying to show what kind of information is there in the Henkel food safety statement. Yeah, you can see it is a very comprehensive document. It actually contains the detailed explanation of the legal framework and its relation to the adhesive. And secondly, a worst case scenario calculation provided wherever it is possible. And thirdly, a clear assignment of responsibilities between Henkel and its customer. And fourth, it is a detailed information on non-intentionally added substances, any other impurities present. And lastly, the absence statements for different harmful chemicals. So it is a very comprehensive document, in fact, and it helps you to ensure the food safety of your product from adhesive point of view. So coming to the conclusive part, I just wanted to tell you two things. Yeah, food safety has become very important for protecting our health, your health, and our children's health. And Henkel can support you and your customer in all the way of your process. That's all, in fact. Here is our food safety portal. Yeah, you can visit this portal anytime. All the information are available here. And if you have any queries, you can contact us at any time. Thank you. Thanks for the attention.
Thank you, Nayan. I now invite Dr. Evert Delbanco, my colleague from Siegwerk, Germany. He is working with Siegwerk as Director, Food Safety and Technology in the Global HSE Sustainability Department. Evert, you have the stage.
No, I do this way. So first of all, thank you very much to all people who are still sitting here. So we have some delay, and I will do my very best to meet your expectations, of course. The title of my presentation is Ink Manufacturer's Perspective on Upcoming Regulations. The program is as follows. I would like to start with the importance of food packaging safety. And I continue with migration, some basics on migration, and why it is so important to manage migration in order to get safety. And finally, I would like to introduce you shortly into our approach within Siegwerk, how we ensure safety and compliance. So, I think it is quite clear after all these presentations that food packaging safety is a must-have. No doubt about that. And this story has three different aspects. I would like to start with the left side. So we need to comply to regulations. That's absolutely key, and we do this. Why do we do this? One reason for that, of course, is to avoid food safety scandals. If we comply to legislation, this helps, of course, to avoid food safety scandals. But of course, we also want to avoid food safety scandals for other reasons. So as soon as we have a food safety scandal, it can, of course, impact the health of consumers. It has an impact on sales. That's for sure. And another reason is that our observation is that after some food safety scandals, legislators get active in order to make legislations, already existing legislations, even stricter, or start to set up new regulations right from the beginning. In the middle is the second aspect. It is about migration. We need to manage migration in order to be safe. So migration is a key step in the whole story, and we need to manage migration, otherwise we cannot ensure safety. And another issue which is becoming more and more important is due to the fact of all this social media. So it is not only food safety scandals which goes into public, and in the meantime in a very rapid way due to all the social media which are available. It can also be just negative statements on certain products, certain observations. They can also go around the globe overnight, and then a bad statement is available, and it can heavily affect reputation of brand owners. So if we talk at Siegwerk about compliance, the whole issue has three different aspects, three different columns. First of all, it is the legal compliance as such. I think that does not need any further explanation, but I have to mention that as soon as we talk about legal compliance, it is by far not harmonized globally. And that makes the whole story of compliance much more complicated. Secondly, we have the brand owner compliance. So many brand owners have own guidelines in terms of food safety. The Nestle guidance note on packaging inks, for example, was already mentioned, but it's not only Nestle. It's, for example, also Perfetti, who has very strict guidelines in terms of food packaging inks, and many other brand owners as well. So it is not only the legal compliance, it is also brand owner compliance, and you can also imagine also the brand owner compliance or the different brand owner requirements are quite complex and quite diverse. And finally, the second column is our self-commitments. I just want to give you one example. It is the UPIA exclusion policy. UPIA is the European Printing Ink Association, and the content of the UPIA exclusion policy is that certain dangerous substances should not be used or have not to be used in manufacturing of inks. And we stick, of course, as UPIA member to this policy, but we do not only stick to this policy in Europe, we apply it globally. In this picture, you can see a typical situation of a quick lunch. It is completely different from what we received today. But I will give you with this picture some examples where food safety plays a role. So first of all, we have here liquid packaging. So of course, as soon as the package is printed, we need to ensure food safety. Secondly, we have here, does not, I have my own pointer, so sorry. Secondly, we have here paper cups. Then we have even more sensitive applications. So I'm not talking only food packaging. I will explain it to you. For example, we have here a pizza box. And the normal procedure to eat a pizza, you can see here, you put it out of the box. Normally on top of the box, there's a print, and then the pizza is in direct contact with the print. So in this case, we are talking about foreseeable direct food contact. Same for this tea bag tags. So it can easily happen that this tag drops into the tea, then for a certain period of time, the ink is in direct contact with the tea, and finally you drink it. It is also another example for foreseeable direct food contact. And I just would like to explain to you that we even take special attention to this kind of sensitive applications. So for us, it is not only food packaging inks. These special exposure scenarios have our specific attention, and for these exposure scenarios, we have specific requirements. So now I would like to move to the migration part of my presentation. And what is migration? I think the explanation is quite easy. Migration is the transfer of a substance from the ink or from any other source through the packaging into the food. That's migration. And there are different mechanisms available. In this case, it is the most relevant one. It is migration according to the diffusion scheme. Here you can see packaging. Here it is, the packaging is enlarged, so you have two different layers of packaging. So there's the outside packaging, and you have even a packaging too, which could be a bag. Then you have noodles inside, and according to the diffusion principle, migrants which are available in the ink, they can diffuse into the food. So that's example number one. And for this migration according to the diffusion principle is benzophenone, which migrated from printed HDPE bottles into food. So it is, there are scandals or real cases available for this type of migration. So second example is migration according to the diffusion scheme. So the setup of the packaging is quite similar. And in this case, we have migrants available in the air as well, and also in the ink, and both of them can migrate into the food. An example for this is migration of, for example, mineral oils from secondary or even tertiary packaging into the food. And finally, I would like to shortly introduce you into the set-off. In this case, we have here a coffee cup which is printed outside, and if you stack the cups and then the second cup is the outside of the second cup is in direct contact with the inside of the first cup, and as soon as you fill coffee or tea or whatever into the cup, migration can occur. An example for a food safety scandal related to that is the first real known food safety scandal which is related to migration. It is the Itx Scandal, which happened from liquid food packaging into milk and juice. So there, in this slide, you can see certain factors which can influence migration behavior. Of course, first of all, it is the size of migrants. So smaller substances have a better migration behavior. They can migrate better, and of course, they have a higher migration risk then. Secondly, it is the application weight of the ink. So the more ink is applied to the packaging, the higher is the migration risk. Third point is storage temperature. So higher temperatures generally make migration faster, and this is also directly connected with a higher migration risk. Then we have the storage period. So as longer packaging is stored, then of course the higher is the migration risk as well. Then we have the substrate as such. So different substrates have different barrier properties. PE has the worst barrier properties, followed by, for example, PET, PBT, PS, and the best barrier properties are related to aluminium. I'm not talking about glass. There's also a total barrier, but if we have aluminium up to a thickness of 6 micrometer, then we are talking about a total barrier. And finally, the food stuff which is packed, of course, has also an influence on migration, so different polarities of foodstuff can change migration behavior. So the next slide I spent only for the food packaging size, because from my point of view it is quite important as well, because you can easily imagine if you have a certain volume of food packed in a small packaging, then of course there's only a limited possibility for migration available, and as soon as you have the same amount of food packed in a different design of packaging, but at least the surface of the packaging is much bigger than in the first example. So in this case, of course, the substances can migrate to a higher extent. So if we go to the examples, I think to the next hall, you are not able to read it, so I will assist you. So in example A, we have a liquid food pack, and in example B, we have a packaging of a small snack, could be an energy snack or whatever. In both cases, the conditions are completely similar. So the migrant content in the solid ink film is 5%. The ink which is applied per square meter is 3 grams, and the ink coverage is in both cases 100%. But the surface mass ratio is different. So in the first example, the surface mass ratio is 6 square decimeter per kilogram foodstuff, and in the second example, it is even double, so the surface mass ratio is 13 square decimeter per kilogram foodstuff, which finally ends up to completely different migration limits. In the first case, it is 9 milligram per kilogram food, and in the second example, it's nearly 20 milligram per kilogram food. So this simple example should just demonstrate that also the surface mass ratio has a huge impact on migration and needs to be taken into consideration. So, talking about migration optimized inks. So we already heard a lot about toluene-free inks, but I have to mention that a toluene-free ink is not necessarily automatically a migration optimized ink. It is just a toluene-free ink. So if we talk about migration optimized inks, we spend a lot of more effort into evaluation of the ink in order to come to this conclusion. In the first example, you see a non-optimized system. Here, the fishes should symbolize the migrants, and the fishnet here is the barrier properties of the substrate. So in both examples, we are taking the same substrate, but we are taking different inks. In the first example, we have a non-optimized ink system, and you can easily see that we have a lot of migrants available with low molecular weight, which can easily migrate through the substrate, and finally they are available in the food. In the second example, we have an optimized system, and the migrants are bigger, and the migration behavior of the formulation is not that good, so that they cannot pass the barrier properties of the substrate, and finally we can say they are not available in the food, or they are available in food to a much lower concentration. So this example which I showed you, the migration optimized inks, is a kind of exposure-driven approach. If we're talking about toluene-free inks, it is a kind of hazard-based approach. Could not only be toluene, we can also talk about mineral oil-free inks or cobalt dryer-free inks. So in all these cases, it is a hazard-based approach and single substances are not available in the ink. But as I mentioned before, that must be very clear that it is not necessarily migration-optimized inks. So in order to get a migration-optimized inks, we need to thoroughly select the raw materials, all ingredients of the ink, and evaluate them in order to come to the conclusion that we have a migration-optimized safe inks. So, finally, in the last block of my presentation, I would like to shortly introduce you to our processes in order to guarantee all the compliance, in order to guarantee compliant inks. First of all, as I already mentioned, we have the self-commitment globally to comply with the UPI exclusion policy, and this is part of our so-called raw material introduction process, which is centrally running in our headquarters in Siegwerk. Colleagues making sure that compliance to the UPI exclusion policy is given. So secondly, of course, we also need to comply with chemical legislation. So in this case, I'm talking about global chemical inventories. So for example, REACH or TSCA in the US. This is chemical legislation. This is, of course, also a requirement, and this is ensured during the raw material introduction process as well. And then, furthermore, we have certain purity standards in terms of raw material. So as soon as the raw material is introduced into Siegwerk, our suppliers receive a questionnaire, and they have to complete this questionnaire and provide a lot of information. So we are also requesting information on non-intentionally added substances in order to be able to make a toxicological assessment and safety evaluation of non-intentionally added substances. So we also have very strict requirements, for example, for our pigments, and this is also ensured during the raw material introduction process, as all these requirements are met. And finally, as soon as the raw material has been qualified, it receives a color code which is based on a traffic light. As soon as the color code is green, this material can be used for so-called NPH, nutrition, pharma, hygiene application. And as soon as the color code is orange, it can also be used for such kind of application, but additional migration tests are required. And as soon as the color code is red, the substance is not qualified for use in Siegwerk inks due to, for certain reasons. Could be compliance reasons or could be toxicological reasons. We provide to our customers so-called statement of composition, which enables the customer to make their own declaration of compliance and also a safety evaluation of migrants. So the key element of this statement of composition is a big table containing a lot of different information. So for example, substance information, dual use information, restrictions, OMLs, amount of the migrant in the dry ink, a worst case calculation, and as I mentioned, also if we are talking about NIAS, also a NIAS risk assessment. Second document, which is quite important, is technical data sheet, and the technical data sheet finally gives the customer indication how to use the ink and for which application the ink can be used. So you can see a statement here right on the top, which indicates that in this example, the ink can be explicitly used for food applications. So this is my last slide. I would like to summarize that we offer solutions and we have migration optimized inks available. We thoroughly select the raw materials and evaluate them, which are part of this migration optimized inks. We are in compliance to IS 15495. We comply to brand owner specifications. We have systematic phase-out processes for substances of concern available, and we also apply solutions beyond, for example, substitution of single substances of concern, for example, toluene. And finally, we communicate in a very transparent way down the packaging chain with our statement of composition and with our technical data sheet. And my final comment is, because the title of my presentation is related to upcoming regulations, you can easily see that our processes are very well established and we do not fear upcoming regulations. We are looking forward to comply also to these upcoming regulations, and from Siegwerk perspective, we do not see any problems or let's say it in other words, we can also provide compliant inks in the future. That's not an issue. Thank you very much for your attention.
The next speaker is Andrew Ng. Andrew is the head of technology for FlexPack for Siegwerk India. Andrew, may I request you to come on the stage?
Thank you, Himesh. Okay, good afternoon or good evening. Okay, I'm going to talk about migration optimized solutions for flexible packaging. So my presentation will actually focus on 3 areas, to tell you why is it important for us to have migration optimized inks. Second part is how do we achieve migration optimized inks, and I'll show you a couple of live examples, the journey that we've been through to help customers, in terms of formulating migration optimized inks, and then towards the end, I'll also share a few examples on, what else can we do more to ensure safety of inks and packaging. So I think we heard a lot today. Inks is a very critical part of the whole packaging value chain. Okay, it is very critical in terms of ensuring safety. Okay, and also at every different value chain, in addition to ensuring safety of the different value chain, they also influence the safety of the environment. How the ink is being manufactured, how the inks is during printing, and even during the consumer use. So all these are very critical. So ink manufacturers, plays a very critical role in ensuring safety of the whole value chain. Therefore, the ink manufacturer will not only need to know what we call the chemistry of the ink, the interactions between all the components, the importance of all the purity of the compositions is also very important. But an ink formulator also needs to know the physics and chemistry in the conversion process, a good understanding, working with the value chain to understand how those conversion process can change, can influence the safety of the ink from production, printing, laminations, even consumer usage, etc. So that the ink manufacturer can provide a solution that is safe for the value chain. So in order to ensure that we have, how do the ink manufacturer do that? There are two key roles that the ink manufacturer or the ink formulator has to do. The first thing is to ensure the exclusion of raw materials, of concern. And the second thing, which is actually designing and selection of the inks with the end use in mind. Very important. So I'm going to touch on these two parts briefly, using some examples. So the first one I'm going to talk about, I will show you some live examples. How do we do that? So in terms of exclusion of materials of concern and contamination and contaminants, I think we have heard a lot from all the experts today. It is important to be able to screen your raw materials to make sure they are safe. That is very critical. As you can see, I listed all the 4 major components of inks. I mean, it looks very simple that we have only 4 components, but actually for each category, you can be looking at from maybe 10 to maybe 50 different raw materials. And in each raw materials, they have different chemistry, they have different process of manufacturing, so they come with a lot of possibility of contaminations and impurities. So a very good understanding of all these raw materials is very critical. So this is one of the very important part of ensuring that you screen through the raw materials, understand where are the potential problems, and making sure that they are not included in your formulations. So this is the most important basis of migration optimized solution. So I'm going to show you two case studies that we work with customers to help them to design migration optimized ink for different application. So the first example is the TNPP example. I think we heard a bit about TNPP today. It's a material of concern because once it breaks down, it can form nonylphenol, which is actually endocrine suppressor. So we have actually these customers who actually printed on chemically coated pad and then laminated into aluminum and then to PE. This is a special job that they printed with an alternate supplier, ink supplier. And unfortunately, this solution or this whole final laminate has an issue of they detected TNPP. So the customer approaches, say that they know Siegwerk has very strong understanding of ink safety. So we work with these customers to try to help them to solve this problem, to help them to actually formulate a solution that is TNPP free. So the journey of optimizing the solutions, what we did, okay? First, what is important is when we receive this problem, okay, we know that TNPP is typically not added as an additive in inks. So we suspected that it is probably due to a contamination in one of the raw materials. So we work with our expert in Europe and to find out, where are the possibility of this contaminant. And we actually identify where is the area that TNPP can be introduced into the system. So by doing that, understanding where the source is, we are actually able to formulate a TNPP-free ink for the customers. So in the end, the ink was actually even certified by third-party lab and also by Siegwerk lab as well that is TNPP-free, and the product is being qualified by the brand owner. So it is very important to not just understand to exclude the raw materials, but you have to understand where the contaminant is coming from so that you can have a sustainable solution of continuously screening to prevent that contaminant from coming into your system. Okay, so this is one of the examples. The second example I'm going to show you is another example of a PMH and MPA. You'll be a bit surprised that, why is this two material of concern? These two material of concern occurs not really due to safety, but due to their impact. They are concerned because of their impact on organoleptic properties. Okay, this has to be one of the customers who uses our compliant ink, and actually when they export to Australia, they found that there are traces of these two components inside, which they do not allow, not because of safety, it's because of it's actually they are potentially affecting the organoleptic properties of the cookies. So Siegwerk went on another journey to work with the customers. We need to find, of course, MPA is pretty standard. We know it's a solvent use. We have to exclude. We can just formulate and exclude that into our formulation. But what is important is when you have this PMH. So we went through a lot of exercise, discussing with our expert. We do a lot of analytics. Then we identify where the source of the PMH is. And then we exclude that raw materials from the formulation. So the other part of excluding a raw material from a formulation is you also need to have the formulating expertise because once you take out that particular raw materials, then maybe you'll lose some of the functional inks. So we're proud that, Siegwerk have the capability in India to actually reformulate away from specific raw materials so that we can exclude all these contaminants of concern from the ink. So this is another example that we did. And we actually successfully formulated a new ink that is actually PMH and MPA free. And the outcome is, again, the customer was able to qualify with the brand owner. So I think it's important, a couple of elements that we see, actually, if you want to do migration optimizing. You must have very deep insight, okay, on the raw materials itself. Where are how is it being made? What are the possible contaminants that is occurring that may come into these raw materials? You must also have a very strong and very rigid screening process to raw material introduction process to make sure that you screen out all these contaminated raw materials. And of course, one of the areas that is important is you must have strong analytical capability. If you don't have that, you cannot find out where all these contaminants are coming from. And the fourth point I made here, which I mentioned just now, the ability to not use those raw materials and formulate inks that is still functional, that's important. So that is the formulating capability is also very important. So the next session, I'm going to talk about designing and selecting inks with the value chain process and end use in mind. This is what I call taking another step further. Not just relying on eliminating materials of concern, but we are also looking at a more integrated approach. Okay, we don't just look at achieving different functionality of the inks, but we also have in mind what may happen in the whole value chain during the printing process, the lamination process, the end use, or even the filling process, the sealing process. How can the ink interact with those environment and maybe generate unsafe situation? So this is very critical. If you have all this end use and all this potential, anticipate all this problem in mind, you can actually again prevent unsafe situation. So I'm going to use two simple examples just to illustrate how our methodology of introducing new or selecting or actually recommending inks to customers. So the first one is the packaging structure. Very simple. It's an overwrap of a candy or chocolate. It's a very simple structure whereby you do reverse, you do surface printing on metallized OPP, and then it's twisted wrap. So in this case, if you look at potential of migration, okay, the metallized PET is actually quite a good barrier. So the possibility of migrants going through the substrate itself is quite low. But do take note of two other situations. This is not sealed or heat sealed. It's actually just twisted. So there's a lot of potential of diffusion. And of course, there's set off migration risk as well. And the other very important thing, the packaged good. In this case, we're talking about chocolate, a high-fat, a highly sensitive filled goods. So any potential of any volatile, like solvents or additives that may dissolve in the fat, very minimal amount will cause actually change in organoleptic properties that can be easily detected by consumer. So in this case, you have to have that kind of, you have to anticipate all this from happening. So the formulator will have to be able to formulate, have the capacity to think about what are the potential areas, what are the additives, what are the raw materials they can use to prevent all this from happening. So looking at, different solvents that will not cause organoleptic issues or additives as well, that's very important. So this is one of the examples that, you must have the end use and the whole package structure in mind. So the second one I'm talking about is not so common here in India yet, but actually in Europe, but I think some of the export jobs are coming in. This is actually a retort pouch, retortable pouch, which is slightly different from a conventional retortable pouch. If you look at the conventional one, it usually has an aluminum layer. So by taking out the aluminum layer, now you have a pouch that is actually more transparent and lighter. And also in this case, what they do for the barrier, actually the barrier is the most external layer, which is actually Allox PET. So in this case, this is a change. So when you want to supply ink for this sort of structure, so again, the formulator will have to be very careful. They have to think, now in this case, there's no aluminum barrier anymore, which is actually an absolute barrier. So the potential of migration of inks and even adhesives as well is into the food is very, very high. The other thing that you have to keep in mind, this is a retortable pouch. You will be exposed to extreme conditions that you will be the chances of forming things like nitrosamine and PAA is very high. You have inappropriate components migrating into the food. So with this in mind, Siegwerk formulators actually design an ink system, keeping this in mind, making sure that those materials that can potentially form nitrosamine and PAA are not introduced into the ink system. So this is another example why I say that it is important to have the end use in mind and understand the whole value chain process. So these are just two simple examples. Siegwerk has a series of migration optimized solutions. Okay, we have different PV inks that is used a lot in reverse printing, lamination. All these are toluene-free, compliant ink. We also have a series of NC inks that can be used for flexo, gravure, surface, reverse printing. And again, these are toluene-free, migration optimized inks. And it goes in a variety of applications. So if you have interest, you can go to our ink clinic. We can talk about this in details because all this, the selection of all these inks will really depends on your end use, so that we can ensure that this is a safe application that we are proposing the solution for you. So in summary, so it is important, the elements I have shown here now today to talk about, to get a safe inks, migration optimized inks, there are certain competencies that the ink formulator needs to have. First thing, very high product safety standard. As we have seen just now, we talk about how the raw material introduction process, very important. How stringent is that process? How systematic is that process? Very deep insight into raw materials, as I mentioned, ability to understand where are the contaminants coming from associated with the raw materials. So then you can trace them, then you can prevent them from going into the system. Strong analytical capability, locally and globally, so that you can do all the analysis you need to track down all these contaminants as well. And formulation expertise, which I've mentioned, ability to formulate without certain raw materials because they are of concern. And then still have an ink that is functional, that meets the end use. Okay? And now, of course, very important is to collaborate closely with all our value chain partner, because we are not the expert of all the other processes. We only have good understanding. But by working together, we are able to anticipate what may happen, what kind of unsafe situation may happen, so that we can actually help to provide a safe ink and a safe packaging. So that's all I have for today.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Andrew. Our last speaker of the day is my fellow BU head for Sheetfed, Rituparna Chakraborty. Currently, he's the business unit head for Sheetfed division at Siegwerk India. So
Thanks, Himish. Good evening, and thank you for staying back for the penultimate session. Himish informs me I have 5 minutes to go through the presentation. I'll try my best. The presentation is basically to give you an idea that in the current scenario of the Indian packaging industry, particularly with the sheet-fed industry, we are seeing quite a few changes, especially with the IS 15495 coming in. And with these changes, the requirements from suppliers, especially a company like Siegwerk, is becoming more and more demanding. And I would briefly touch upon how we are trying to adapt and change and get in new products that would help our customers meet the IS 15495 regulatory compliance. A statistics which I would want to share is that year on year we collect information about compliance requirements that we get from our customers. And a very interesting statistics is in 2016, we received 392 inquiries from our customers as regards food and pharmaceutical compliance for the inks that the Sheetfed division was supplying them. In 2017, it went up to 786, which means there was a 90% increase in the compliance requests that came in from our customers from a national level. Almost 15 inquiries a week. Now that definitely brings about the interest that is getting generated to have compliant ink systems for various segments that we cater to. Now, in keeping that in mind, what we have done is that Siegwerk India has come up with an ink system which you would be launching today. We have showcased it with the display and catalogs in the ink clinic. We are calling it the Tempo Vibrant, and this ink system is basically a low VOC ink system. It meets high-end packaging printing machine requirements, and all in all, it is IS 15495 compliant for secondary food packaging. Let me be clear, it is for secondary food packaging, it's not for primary food packaging. This ink system, in terms of whatever is available in the market today, has very good features in terms of color strength, in terms of lamination properties, in terms of scuff, gloss resistance, and all in all, it helps our business partners, our buyers, converters, in terms of realizing value proposition. The USPs of this ink system is basically IS 15495 compliant. It is using optimized mineral oil content. The mineral oil content of this ink system is less than 10%. It can go up to and support machines with speeds up to 18,000 impressions per hour. Very high color strength and intensity. The mileage for the various trials that have been conducted in the country today gives around 10 to 20% additional mileage. We don't use any fannel colors in this ink system, and it has got flexibility and better adhesion with UV OPV. For packaging which uses the conventional inks for the primary food packaging, we are currently importing the Tempo NutriPack series from Europe. This ink series that is being imported from Europe is a low migration, low odor ink series with excellent printability features, and it is developed and manufactured at a dedicated processing site in Spain. 75% of the raw material that goes into manufacturing this product is from renewable resources. So the sustainability profile for this ink is also maintained. In terms of regulatory compliances, my colleagues have previously talked about all the compliances that our inks in Europe meet. So if you see the regulatory compliance in terms of the EC regulation, the plastic regulation, Swiss ordinance, Nestle compliance, compliance to good manufacturing practices are all met up by this ink series. To manufacture this ink, the raw materials are evaluated through the risk assessment, through organoleptic property testing, and also the cross-contaminations are checked anytime spot colors are manufactured with the inks. It is manufactured in Loches, which is in Spain. It's a dedicated site. There is no use of mineral oils at this site. GMP, as per the European requirements, is maintained here. The site is ISO 9001 and 14000 compliant, and the staff and the managerial people are very compliant to manufacture this ink system. This slide will give you an idea about how this ink system is compliant. Around 75% of the ink systems out here is made from renewable energy, which makes it one of its kind in the industry today. It is entirely vegetable-based formulation. there is no VOC in this. It is GMO free. And hence, there is no VOC in that. For the non-absorbent ink series, we have the Secura NutriPlast, which is manufactured at a site in Switzerland. This too is a low migration, low odor ink series, and it is manufactured in the state-of-the-art formulation site, as I mentioned, in Aarberg in Switzerland. This ink system has a wide variety of application, right from shrink sleeves to in-mold label, to self-adhesive labels, wraparound labels, for metallized folding boxes, metal containers, and tubes. So this ink system will be able to handle a wide variety of products that our customers would want to print with. It also has the lowest migration levels that can be talked about in the industry today, meeting up to the expectation in terms of the regulatory requirements. So coming to the manufacturing part, the raw materials here are selected through the process called the RMIP, which is the raw material introduction process. Evert had spoken about it. Risk assessment is done for all the raw materials that is used for manufacturing this. And the manufacturing site in Aarberg is the one which has GMP in place, which has got ISO certifications, and it avoids any cross-contamination. So all in all, from a Siegwerk perspective, what we would want to mention is that as an organization, we are today ready to partner with our brand owners and our customers to help them meet the IS 15495 requirements. In terms of the secondary packaging, secondary food packaging, we have the Tempo Vibrant Conventional Ink series, and this is already validated and it is ready for any trials in the country today. As far as the primary packaging, food packaging goes, we are talking about the Tempo NutriPack 2 series. This currently is being imported from Spain. We are going to be stocking this so that it is available off the shelf from our factory and facility in Bhiwadi. And we are planning to look at manufacturing this from Q1 2019 in Bhiwadi in a special enclosed and a dedicated site. The Secura NutriPlast 2, which is the UV ink series, will be imported, stocked, and supplied from the Bhiwadi plant. From Q4, we plan to stock and sell it against demand from customers. And maybe in Q4 2019, we would look at manufacturing this in the site in Bhiwadi. All this depends upon how the market moves, how the volumes build up, and it has to be economically feasible to look at manufacturing both these inks, which are currently being imported from Europe, in the Indian context. With that, I would like to end my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ritu.